Bosses of Reddit, what is the stupidest thing you have had to fire someone for? One of the security guys at my company was caught masturbating to porn during the day at the main reception desk by a female PA. When we had his exit interview, we asked him why he did it, and he just said he felt really comfortable at work and got carried away while browsing Reddit. He'd been with the company for years. The best part was a colleague of mine who came back from vacation a week later and asked what happened to Ron. Someone said he was fired and immediately the guy said, oh what? Did he get caught jerking off? But he didn't even know. He just got the vibe that Ron would be the type to jerk it at work. One of my salesmen had a customer stop during a test drive so he could buy some crack. On the upside, he did offer to share it with them. Putting a customer's info in the system as first name, don't care, last name, smells like it. Forgot cheese on cheese pizza, twice. One of the lifeguards was really hungover so he took it in the pool so we didn't have to open up for the day. In my imagination, I combine all of these stories to be about the same guy and all his misadventures at different businesses. A concessions attendant gave a pot brownie to my 75-year-old door person at my movie theater. She didn't press charges but he had to go. No paperwork on it either. I had him resign. Edit. This story clearly struck a chord with a lot of people. I will try to answer as many questions as possible. She, the door person, didn't know what was wrong. A friend of hers visited that evening and figured it out. She told me the next day. I was off the day it happened. He, concessions, didn't deny anything. Actually thought what he did was 100% okay. Completely disconnected from what could have happened. Actually asked for his job back a few times. Years later he apologized after going to rehab. I'm pretty sure the guy still smokes. Just a guess. I haven't spoken to either of them in ages. The theater was in Northern California. That's as close as I want to identify it. This was a long time ago and we worked it out with every party's agreement. I'm happy and I'm fairly certain that they are too. Oh, I am so excited to share. I had an 18-year-old employee go to Vegas for a long weekend. He had been late a few times before and had been warned that continued tardiness would result in disciplinary action. So this Einstein is headed back from Vegas with his buddy after they both blew all their money and they realize that they don't have enough gas to make it back. He really doesn't want to be late. Already you are probably thinking of the multitude of options available to these two fine upstanding citizens. They could call saying they were in a jam. They could beg for $20 and see if anyone took pity on them. Or they could steal some gas. They chose none of these options. The two of them decided the best option was to take a handgun from their trunk, go into a gas station, hold it up, and demand exactly $20. They then drove 1 mile down the road to the next gas station where they filled up, paid, and were surrounded by the police as they were attempting to pull back onto the road. When I first heard what happened I was sure the story must be exaggerated or wrong. I knew the kid wasn't the sharpest knife in the drawer. But I never dreamed anyone could do something so amazingly idiotic. It still boggles my mind. In high school a guy I knew stole a giant Ronald McDonald made of Legos from the McDonald's he worked at. It was one of those guess the number of pieces contests. He got away with it. But later on he was busted for stealing boxes of hash brown wrappers with Monopoly game pieces on them. Cops show up at his place to arrest him over the hash browns. Lo and behold there sits Ronald in the middle of his room. I once worked in a retail store where we all had our own access codes that allowed us to do stuff. And if our code didn't allow us to do it, we weren't supposed to be doing it. On his first day during training he managed to catch the general manager's code as he was typing it in and used it for about a week. Pretty much gave away thousands of dollars of equipment in the manager's name. It was particularly stupid because he did it because he still had his trainee position which required somebody to look over most of what he did if he wanted to give discounts, etc. If he had waited another couple of days he would have been moved up to full staff member and could have given out most of those discounts anyway without anybody noticing or caring. He just couldn't wait to give his friends all the free swag. One of my technicians used our remote software to start typing to a girl whose machine he took control of. He opened Notepad, wrote "what up slut" and then went to Pornhub. Supervisor gets an email about sexual harassment the same day and he's gone the next morning. Employee wrote asshole on the bottom of a customer's oil filter. Customer decided to change his oil one day. Something. Fired. Edit. At the time employees were required to sign their initials for upper bay and lower bay with the date. The upper bay tech signed JJ, and the lower bay tech was as. JJ was pissed at us that day and finished the lower bay's initials with shoulder beside it and handed it to him to install. Customer found it a month later doing his own oil change and brought the filter. Employee admitted it and was terminated from above. Still friends to this day and he is now a teacher. We worked at a place that bought in used cell phones. She bought a cell phone from a guy and his Facebook was still open. She posted as the guy on his Facebook something like I'm a big ducking idiot. Guy came back to complain. She was fired. I was the manager of a Papa John's and a lady called and complained about a driver going too fast near her kids. Driver comes back and I say, Pat, a lady called. Try and slow it down a bit. He goes postal in front of a packed audience of pickup customers. Duck you. Man. Whose side you on? Not mad. Pat, just be careful. Nah. Duck you schlying. Pat dude. Not mad. Just be careful. Ah. No. Duck that. You and I need to go outside. Calm down. Dude. Not mad lad yak. Don't worry. Duck. You. FLPPPBBT babble mibble babble. You're done. Man. Go home. Most awkward pizza firing aside from when this dude tried to kill me when I worked on the coast. Pat S a nurse now. I had to fire this kid from a gas station I worked at after he asked me if I ever poked holes in the condoms with a push pin, as he proceeded to punch holes in condoms. I have no idea how long he was doing it for. He worked there for over a year. Manager at a delivery joint here. We had to let someone go because they decided to deliver pizzas in a stolen car. I was an editor on my college's student daily newspaper. We had a photography staff that would photograph events, sports games, etc. But they'd also sometimes have to do stupid stock photo type things for feature or trend articles. Think like a photo of someone filling out a college application for a story on college admissions or something. Anyway, we had two photographers who were apparently in a group of friends that had formed some kind of snake cult, probably had another name that they used, but we called it the snake cult when we found out about it. The way we found out about it was that we started noticing this weird symbol in the background of some of our feature article photographs, on a post-it note in the background of a shot of some library books, or in the shape of the food in a photo of some dining hall food for an article about meal plans. Once we discovered it, we looked back and saw it had been going on for months. So yeah, we had to fire some photogs for slipping cult symbols into our student paper on a regular basis. I worked with a guy who was fired for regularly watching porn at his desk. They talked to him several times and he just never stopped. This arsehole would spend all day on this website talking to random people and embellishing his life. He would talk about these weird jokes that no one in the office got and spend a massive amount of time looking at pictures with text on it. The pictures weren't even different. It was all to collect these fake internet points. No idea why it was so appealing. Late to the party, so I'm sure this will get buried. But here goes anyway. I was the assistant manager at a store that had an actual time clock and a point system. For those of you that don't know, a point system is basically just a magnet for turnover. 1 minute late and you get a point, the same as if you are 30 minutes late. Call in sick, you get 2 points. If I didn't log it at least 30 minutes prior to your shift, no call, no show, and you get 4 points. It took 8 points to get fired at this particular company, and the points were logged at headquarters, not at the facility. I had a single mother. Dad bailed when she was pregnant. That worked for me. And she was the best damn employee any human could ask for. She worked hard, stayed late if it was needed, picked up extra shifts from co-workers that wanted off, and more importantly, she was damn good at her job. Well, her son got sick on her way to take him to the babysitter one day. He projectile vomited blood all over back seat. I saw the car and it looked like a scene from a horror movie. Needless to say, she didn't call in. She panicked and took him to the hospital. Boom, she had 4 points. Over the next 2 weeks he was in the hospital and had random tests. The boy was 4. So when those tests randomly popped up she would call in to be with him instead of having the grandmother watch him while she was at work. Twice those tests were announced while she was on her way to work, so she had to call in, and I understood why she did. I am a father. I didn't mind working the long shifts to cover her absence. No decent human would have. I received a call the day after her second call-in, while the child was being tested, and corporate made my heart sink. I had to fire this woman, whose son was in the hospital, possibly dying, and I had to tell her that she was no longer employed. I spent over 5 hours arguing on her behalf to corporate, but it was to no avail. She came in the next day. I fired her like I was supposed to, and I immediately quit my job, without notice. One of my cooks asked for a smoke break. Told him to go for it. He hadn't come back after 10 minutes, so I looked out the window. He was smoking a crack pipe. He came back in, started cooking some food, turned to me and said, DJS9PD, I don't feel so good. I think I need to go home. Yeah Reggie, maybe it's because you just smoked crack by the dumpster. Get the hell out. Damn man. I can still prep. I then spent 5 minutes explaining to him why I couldn't have a crackhead using a giant cheese knife. To this day, I don't think he still understands why he was fired. Edit from work. Here's a picture of Reggie with identifying marks removed. We worked at this sort of pastor Asian hybrid place that failed, and like many have pointed out, drugs were used by the kitchen staff. My only rules were, don't do anything on the clock and don't do it in uniform. Reggie had screwed up a few times. I hated letting him go because he actually was a good line cook. The guy found another cook job pretty quickly. I was managing a restaurant and did morning cash out. I checked all slips against the information in the computer. I noticed a new hire had really good tip averages the day before when I had been paying her out. The next day I was going through her slips and noticed a discrepancy. Mainly that she had added a 1 in front of each tip and changed the total. How could I tell you ask? She used different color ink. She was fired and we refunded the money. Seriously, at least use the same color ink. Receptionist who forgot to wear pants. I was at a satellite office and had 4 employees call me separately to let me know there were some previous issues. Plus they were pretty sure she was on something. I had a manager steal a bag that a customer had left on the counter. He completely denied it too, and I believed him. But the customer was sure he left it there and asked to see the video. I hadn't seen anything odd, so I showed it to him. He pointed out the bag, which we watched until the manager of 10+ years took the bag and left. Idiot. This actually just happened. Our supplier came out onto my construction site and cooked everyone a free Barbie. This one bloke had a meltdown and almost had a fight with the chef. Their conversation started off like this. Guy, where's the butter? Chef, ain't got no butter mate. Guy, what kind of Barbie is this without any butter? Chef, a free one. If you don't like it, don't have it. Then the guy blew up yelling at the chef for making smart-ass comments and swearing his head off. While the chef thought nothing of it and remained really calm and telling the guy to take it easy. Our site does not tolerate this kind of behavior. Needless to say, we kicked the guy off site ASAP. Lost a job over a free Barbie and butter lol. Edit. Turns out there was butter in the fridge. Worked at a nightclub. One of the workers called in sick, but he was actually going to some party instead. Could you guess where they went after the party? Yes, to our nightclub. Full stop. There was one time I had to fire someone because I sent him out on a job that would only take 2-3 hours to complete. Before he left, he mentioned to the receptionist that he was going to make it last all day. She mentioned it to me, and sure enough, he returned over 8 hours later. Being dishonest with a client's money is not something I was going to tolerate. I used to manage a hotel. You would not believe the amount of female employees I had to constantly remind it was against company policy to have sex with the guests. One woman, she was about 20 years old, who I had to remind this of several times, was caught mid-act having sex with a guy that was about 65 and looked like Santa Claus. After she was fired, one of her co-workers told me that this woman had a Santa Claus fetish and thought she'd never get the opportunity to act on it, so it was worth possibly getting caught and fired. Girl was pretty decent looking too. Not showing up and not calling in. Everyone has a phone and can make up a itty excuse. Call and let me know you are not going to show up so I can get someone else. Duck. I worked with a guy who got fired for buying porn on eBay all day at work. I thought this was pretty out there until I saw the other porn at work stories here. But still, I think this takes the cake because he was internet savvy and still paying for second-hand porn DVDs. That's varsity level work porn stupid. Personal hygiene. You'd think people would have the common courtesy to shower before working with others. That person smelled like pure BO with it sprinkled on top. One of my maintenance guys tried to stab a guy over a bag of dirt. Company dirt. Dirt. I told him to stop getting high before work. I even told him he was a good worker when not high, and that I didn't care what he did off the clock. I literally told him that people could smell weed on him, and that he acted like an idiot while high. He apologized, agreed with me, even offered up the fact that it was, in fact, affecting his work. Next day, shows up stoned to the bone. Sorry, guy. You're fired. In the interview, he was told he would have to take a drug test if he was hired. He was hired. He failed the drug test. When I brought him in and told him that he failed, he said, yeah, I knew I would. Then, why? I'm sure it's not unusual, but still, why bother? He quit another job to take one that he knew he would lose immediately. Why? The other job, by the way, was janitor in a high school, which I assume he went back to. Worked at KFC. Guy got fired for doing sugar at work. In the office, where there are cameras. In hindsight, probably should have seen it coming. He showed up to the interview with shirt with the Wheel of Fortune board on it. Said GFCKYRSLF and underneath that, would you like to buy a vowel? Guess that was his nicest shirt. Also, I once saw him eat ice out of a bucket that had raw standing chicken water. Kind of speaks volumes of KFC that he even got hired. A PC technician was being pestered with questions from a customer about sales stuff. He lost it, and while looking the customer square in the face, the employee had his eyes closed, however, said, "Get away from me or I'll eat your face." It took half the day to get over the laughter and WTF of the situation before we could even begin on paperwork. Not a boss, but HR, had a guy on a temporary work comp transitional assignment at a retail store. His regular job had very good pay, a lot of benefits, etc. The moron stole a used scuba suit from his temporary job site, on camera. Bonus, we're well over 1,000 miles from any ocean. Backstory, employee Ed works a union job, works 40 hours per week, makes about $60K per year, full benefits, full pension, tons of paid vacation, and is in his early to mid 30s. Ed has absolutely no education, did not even finish high school, is socially awkward, pretty much sucks at his job, is physically weak, often injured, never enough for a doctor to find a problem, just enough to get alternate duty. Basically, the picture I'm painting is that Ed would be homeless if it wasn't for this job for life he somehow lucked into. He is completely unemployable otherwise. Method King Ed takes funeral leave for a Thursday and a Friday for his mother's funeral. Some other manager who seems to remember his mom dying a few years ago does some snooping, and eventually asks for some proof. Ed turns in a faked obituary, gets found out, and fired. I still think about that guy sometimes. He turned down the best gig of his life for a stupid 4-day weekend, when he had like 20 paid days off available for use anyway. Edit, to all the people saying 20 days. That's nothing. Here in England we get 2 years paid off every year. 1. I get it. Different countries are different. 2. I never said this happened on the 1st of January. Maybe he only had 20 days left after using 20 more. 3. I was actually referring to individual paid days off in addition to paid vacation, once it comes in 5-day increments anyway. A dumb guy at work. Call him Julio. We worked clothing retail together. One night, closing shift. We are folding tons of clothing, working our way from the outer tables inwards. laughing and joking as we went. Julio is a fun guy to be around. Sometimes he'll moonwalk, dance, sing, general clonery to make the shift enjoyable. So that fateful night, we're almost done. About 8 of us are working on the last 2 tables of clothing. Julio does his funny dance from there to there and ends up grinding with a coworker. She dances along and he poked her with his boner. She noticed and angrily jumps away. Dumbus was dry humping her ass, pitching a tent, and he decided to continue dancing around with pelvic thrusts in everyone's direction. Needless to say, Julio and Julio Jr. were fired for sexual harassment. Edit number 1. The assumption that the girl he grounded against is the one who complained. I don't know who did. He had a history of behavior like that. He was an outgoing guy who got away with lots of stuff. Always joked and played around. I guess someone finally got sick of his it after he was let go. I heard of other girls and customers express, to varying degrees, a sense of satisfaction. He'd been doing that for a while, I guess. Worked at a fairly large used bookstore in Nick. We often listed and sold rare books online, and sometimes had really unusual items that were truly one of a kind, signed and numbered, or personally inscribed from one famous person to another, or whatever. One day, we get a phone call from one of the managers from the huge bookstore up the street, which also happens to be our biggest competitor. He explains that he has a large stack of merchandise that he is sure was stolen from our store. Apparently, earlier that day, a fellow had come to his store with some books and art prints he was hoping to sell. The manager looked a few of them up and quickly deduced that they were stolen. 2 of the items in particular were really exceptionally rare and obviously identifiable as belonging to us. This would have all been bad enough, but the manager had one last piece of information to share. Thing is, he says, I'm pretty sure that the guy who brought them in works for you. I've seen him over there a bunch of times. He usually works Sundays and Mondays. Tall guy, blonde hair, wears cowboy shirts, blah blah blah, and proceeds to absolutely and without a shadow of a doubt identify our sales associate Dan. Dan had apparently gone into our rare book room, stolen the books, which were already listed for sale on the internet, walked an entire 4 blocks to one of the most famous bookstores in the city, and tried to sell his stolen loot to one of the booksellers he saw at least twice a week in our store. Unbelievable. If we hadn't fired him for theft, we would have had to fire him for the epic stupidity. I'm not a boss, but a guy at a former job got fired because he broke a light fixture when he was ducking around with a mop. The manager on duty, who admittedly was a little insane, whipped his head around and in the most terrifying voice said, "Sweep that up. Then get the duck out." Damn it. It's my time to shine and I'm late to the party. I was working in Australia and hired an American from Oregon. Let's call him Mark. I too am American. Important. It wasn't one simple act but a collection of retardancy so grand. I don't know if I can really type this. First things first. Duck this guy. So, I hired him cause I needed someone pronto and the hiring had to be done. Now, he was ready to go and able to do this relatively simple lifting job. The next day he got kicked out of the hostel he was in because someone stole his meat out of the fridge. He then asked me if he could stay with me till he found a new hostel. Whatever, sure. Dumbest thing I have ever done. Next day I am sitting in my office, in my house, and I hear banging. WTF. I walk into the kitchen, other side of the house, and he is in there trying to cut a ducking can of blackberries in half with a butter knife. No it. Dude. What are you doing? And what the hell? How are you supposed to open these things? Bullet man. With a can opener. What? You mean like one of those things you use to open a beer? And he makes the hand gesture. Yeah, sorta. It's brother really. Always on a pocket knife together. Different ends though. What? Those are for beer. You're stupid. How would that even work? Beer bottles are screw off. Duck me. I walk off. 10 minutes later I walk to the kitchen for water. Not really sure. Don't remember. But he is sitting on the couch and it looks like he broke the can open with a rock. Eating the blackberries with his hands. Covered in it. Smiling from ear to ear. I assume because he foiled natural selection yet again. 2 days later. At this point he has proven to be a horrible employee, but at home, men ducking, blowing, Sitting in my office, he just walks in and asks for a pair of socks. Duck that and duck you. I will let you borrow anything of mine except my underwear and socks. Nope. His are dirty and he doesn't want to do a load. I tell him no and he complains a bit but walks off. A few minutes later he is back and is asking for a pair of scissors. Whatevs. Top drawer I say. He grabs them, says thanks and walks off. He walks back into my office but just stands behind me, not saying anything. I ignore him for a solid minute. I can feel the energy building. Finally, I slump my shoulders and push off from my desk and turn around. This dumb mother ducker is so proud of himself. He holds up 2 socks. What is that? Dude, I made new socks. Ha, I took one of my old socks, cut it in half. Now I have a new pair. It suddenly clicks. I hired a spastic. Dude, what the duck are you talking about? You cut a sock in half. Now you just ruined a dirty sock. Back of my brain. Holy it. New socks equals clean socks. One sock covered his toes but not his heel and one sock covered his foot but not his toes not his heel. He wore those things for 3 days to prove a point. I fired him when I caught him bragging to a customer about hourly pay but let's be honest here. It was the socks and blackberries that did it, among other things. He didn't move out for another 3 days. I got a great one. My friend and I were both district managers for a vendor company that worked in Home Depots building displays and merchandising. One day one of the workers was on the store phone talking with one of the owners of the company. Owner hears in the background an in-store page for a manager he knows had been fired a month before. Turns out this guy had made an hour-long recording of the inside sounds of a Home Depot and would play it on his stereo anytime someone would call him. Fooled everyone for months. My buddy and me drove to his house and parked outside and called him. My friend asked him where he was, and he goes, I'm at the store. We tell him, you might want to look out your window. We see his curtain part a little bit and close fast. We told him don't bother coming out. You're fired. Got to give him credit for the balls and ingenuity though. Had an employee call in sick a few busy retail Saturdays in a row. The pattern got me a bit suspicious, but I had no proof until a coworker, who wasn't all too happy working up front short-handed again, came into my office cell phone in hand to show me selfie photos that the sick employee had just posted to Facebook of her sunbathing. This guy always tried to hide at work to avoid working. One day I was looking for him and I stepped into the bathroom. I notice a shoe print on the back of the toilet, and I look up and one of the ceiling tiles is pushed a little to the side. I climb up there,